My girlfriend and I were crossing through a graveyard when she abruptly stopped and grabbed my arm. She grinned. I knew that grin. Here? In a cemetery? I asked. It felt a little weird. Disrespectful, too. She mewed and pulled off her shirt. I looked around. It was obvious we were alone. Even though it had stopped raining an hour earlier, it was still misty and cool. New England autumn was in full effect. The ground was covered in dead leaves. The place looked creepy. We're gonna get soaked, I complained, but I started taking off my pants. I already am, she whispered. I thought about making a joke and telling her that she should have brought an umbrella, but I figured it wasn't the time or place. We did what we apparently needed to do. She seemed to enjoy it, at least. Afterward, I was trying to pick leaves and grass off and out of myself while she grabbed our clothes off the headstone. Recognize the name? She asked. Whose name? She pointed. My eyes widened. Rudolf Janz Mendelssohn is fucking buried here? I exclaimed. She grinned. I wish I could have met him, she complained. You know he would have killed you, right? Like the others. No, I don't think so. We would have gotten along just fine. Again she grinned. I probably could have given him a reason or two to keep me alive. She grabbed my crotch, as if I didn't get what she was talking about. The late afternoon dimness was giving way to full dark. Fog joined the mist and it crept down the hill into the cemetery like a shroud. My girlfriend looked enthralled. I'm getting chilly, I told her. It's probably time we head back. Hang on a minute, let me just take this all in. She pulled her phone out of her pocket and started snapping pictures of the headstone. I want everyone to see where we were. She got a couple shots, then gave me the phone to hold. Thick, cold raindrops began to fall. Yeah, that's probably our cue to leave, I insisted and started to walk away. While I was pulling my sweatshirt over my head, I heard her gasp, then moan. What's Ro? I started to say, but then felt the blood drain from my head as I saw what was causing her to make those sounds. A cracked skeletal hand, had burst from the ground and was gripping her ankle. I shouted and grabbed her arm, but she pulled away. Blood wept through her denim as the hand gripped ever tighter, and after a second I heard the bone crack. She didn't cry out, though. Her face took on an expression of intense discomfort, but she refused to shout. I didn't refuse. I yelled and kicked at the hand as profound horror forced adrenaline through my body. Again I tried to grab her arms. She struggled, but I held tight. I pulled as hard as I could. As I did, a hideous rotting corpse was dragged from its grave. Rudolf Janz Mendelssohn. Let me go, she finally screamed. Let me go. I was sobbing now and expending all the effort I could to pull her away from the corpse. His misshapen head seethed with maggots and his eyes and tongue bulged out like some benthic atrocities that had never been exposed to light. Meatherian, he groaned, and his other hand reached up and grabbed her back, his nails sinking into the flesh and using it to pull. Methyen. Let me go, let me go, let me go, she continued to scream. My eyes were closed now as I pulled with singular purpose. I felt teeth sinking into my arm and my eyes flew open as I shouted with pain. In that moment of agony and surprise, my grip loosened. My girlfriend fell back into Mendelssohn's grip, and he squeezed her against his rotting, pulpy body. His swollen tongue passed over her neck and face. She wasn't struggling anymore. She just watched me and watched my reaction. Mendelssohn squeezed harder and I heard his ribs splinter as my girlfriend's body was pulled inside. Thank you for helping me be with him, she said to me, as she was drawn deeper into his putrid carcass. I always knew we'd be perfect together. I never should have moved to this place. I should have stayed in my crummy little cockroach-infested apartment downtown. Those tenacious little monsters are bad enough, but my current predicament is worse than cockroaches or bedbugs. A lot worse. Let me explain. For years I was looking for a house I could afford. It was a dream of mine to own a place that I could call my own. Just like my parents' house where I had grown up and had so many memories. I was sick of paying rent. I wanted to plan for my retirement and build a nest egg for the future. I socked away cash for a down payment, practically starving myself and working overtime and weekends for years. But the price of homes in my city kept skyrocketing, far outpacing my savings. Eventually, I determined the only way I would be able to buy a place was if it was in a neighboring town, somewhere small and out of the way where nobody else wanted to live. Finally, I managed to find a place, though it meant lowering my standards substantially. I settled down in the tiny bungalow on a quiet street in a lonesome little town named Hollows End. The house was modest, but I got it for a bargain. "It's the old groundskeeper's place," the realtor told me. "He's got no use for it anymore. Not where he is." The man looked down at the ground with a sad look on his face and shook his head. I nodded sympathetically and closed the deal with a handshake. The one-story home is old, square, dingy white, and squat like a mushroom. Its roof is a bit off the level and dips down at one end, a characteristic I naively thought to be charming at first. But because of structural issues, everything in the attic is a little bit mushy, and on rainy days I have to set out buckets in strategic places to catch the steady drip 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 of water which inevitably finds its way through the ceiling. Yellow spots can be seen here and there when you look up in pretty much any room in the house. Floors in the place are likewise slanted and dip down towards the center, making an unnatural gully that tricks the observer's eye and makes you feel like you're in a fun house at the carnival when you step inside. But like I said, I got a good deal on the place. I plan to fix the roof and floors and repair the water damage in order to make it into a home for many years to come. I have a brand new Home Depot do-it-yourself book that I plan to make excellent use of very soon. But things have changed. After what happened last night, I was awoken from a dead sleep by a clank and a clatter. It sounded like it was coming from the cemetery behind the house. There was an odd orange glow coming in through my window as well. My half-asleep mind tried to make sense of the noise. Every inch of my body tensed up and my throat became tight with fear, my mouth dry. The sound of my heartbeat drummed in my ears deafeningly in time with the pounding force of it against the ribcage in my chest. In the darkness of my bedroom, the glowing orange light became brighter, the noise louder as it came closer. Desperately, my mind raced to try to picture what could make those noises. The sound of heavy chains rattling, perhaps? Someone dragging them around the cemetery, but why? Whoever it was, I heard them come nearer to the back of my house, closer and closer until I could hear the ragged, wheezing sound of them breathing. The chain link fence at the back of my property rattled and shook like someone was pressing their weight against it. The orange glow of the light it carried flickered and shone intermittently brighter and darker, like whoever it was carried a torch or a lantern. I realized I was holding my breath, afraid to make a sound, for I knew that whoever it was outside my house, they were not human. The way they moved and the sound of their breathing, the rattling of the chains they carried with them. Maybe it's a prank, my thoughts said. Some kids outside, teenagers trying to scare you. Just go to the window and look out and you'll see some drunken college kids doing what drunken college kids do. Hijinks. I stood on wobbly legs and checked the time on my phone. 3:10 a.m. The noise of whoever it was breathing and their chains rattling against my fence made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. It's not kids. Something else. Something you're not meant to see. Something no one should ever see. Don't look at it. My bare feet patted across the cold hardwood floor of my bedroom and I heard the soft tink, tink of a bucket catching rainwater in the kitchen. As I got closer to the window, I heard it pouring outside as well. And then the loud crash of thunder made me jump, my heartbeat spiking disturbingly faster and harder for a few moments until my mind realized what had happened. It's just thunder and lightning, nothing to be scared of. You're not a little kid anymore. The curtains were pulled across, letting in just a little bit of light that peeked through the center. I pulled the gap open wider with a trembling hand and looked out. In the rain, standing with a hand against my fence, was a black hooded creature. It looked like the Grim Reaper crossed with a millipede. Far too many legs and a long body that extended long and lumpy out behind it. It carried a lantern in a pale crooked claw, talon-like fingernails wrapped around it. It was difficult to discern many details in the dark, and with that billowing cloak wrapped around it, but I thought I saw talismans and medallions made of gold around its neck. One of them looked like an hourglass. The creature held a long thin chain. Swinging suspended from it was a lantern, a flickering flame held inside a glass box. It watched me closely for a few seconds, its features indiscernible inside the hood it wore, which cast its face in shadows. I could not stand to look at it for a moment longer and covered the window with the curtains once again. Backing away on unsteady legs, I heard a sound escaping my lips that I did not recognize as my own voice. There was a part of me that wanted to just curl up in the fetal position and hide in bed under the covers, whimpering until morning. That part of me won handily. Bravery is not one of my strong suits. I did not sleep though. A sound kept me awake all night. The sound of digging. The next morning I looked outside again, not quite as afraid in the light of day, and saw the creature was gone. Green rolling hills and plain, ordinary tombstones stared back at me from behind the house once again. I almost managed to convince myself it had all been a dream, but there was something else back there too. Just behind my fence where the thing had been standing was a very large hole. This hole was different from the typical rectangular ones seen in a cemetery. It was large and round, and when I went out to look at it more closely, I observed with some concern that it was leading towards my house. The sound of steady digging could be heard from deep inside. The floor seemed to tremble and sink a little more beneath my feet when I went back inside my house. I went into the bedroom to grab a few precious things and ran back out through the living room. I clutched my laptop and some irreplaceable memorabilia in my arms, and it all went flying suddenly when the floor caved in beneath my feet. Falling down into the darkness beneath my house, I landed in a cavernous space, freshly dug from the earth. I screamed for help and to my surprise heard a voice up above. It sounded like my real estate agent. He ignored my pleas for help and continued speaking calmly to someone who was with him. It's about time. Now we can start showing this dump again and try to reel in another buyer. What were they talking about? That was my house. I screamed obscenities at them, but they continued on unfazed. And then I saw the broken floor I had fallen through begin to mend itself. The cracked floorboards stretched back together like healing skin. Their faces looked down at me finally and smiled. "This isn't your house," they said together as one. "This place belongs to the groundskeeper. Always has, always will." And with that the floor sealed itself back together and they were gone, leaving me alone in darkness. I really wish I'd just stayed at my old apartment.